Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite our first Ms. Chee Siok Chen, the Executive Director of ARDA, for her presentation. And you have a copy with an abstract of the presentation. Does anyone not have an abstract? Okay, I will be passing them out when the speakers begin. So Ms. Chee Siok Chen, please, Ms. Chee, give it out.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind that I be seated while I'm giving my presentation. Thanks. First of all, thank you for being here. I hope you didn't have too good a lunch, because that poses a problem for us here at the table. As Fong Wei had said, my name is Chee Siok Chen. Chee is the family name. So please feel free to call me Siok Chen. I come from Singapore, and I am the Executive Director of ARDA. But the other role I do play back in Singapore is that I am an opposition politician with the Singapore Democratic Party. Just let me confess that I'm no expert in the political and social situation in Vietnam, although I do keep in close contact with some of the NGOs like Women, and I do get regular newsletters from UVBC and the Montagnard. I visited Hanoi briefly in 2004, and whilst I was there for that very short visit, I did manage to speak to Dr. Ban Jiang. I don't know if I pronounced his name correctly. And I also spoke on the phone with the wife of From Hong Zen. That was the very period that she told me on the phone that her husband was being taken to a jail that's further into the outskirts, and she was very emotional over the phone. I had also campaigned against, I don't know if you know this case of Van Nguyen, the Vietnamese Australian who was sentenced to death in Singapore for drug trafficking back in 2006. We had campaigned against the death penalty for him, and I think that created quite a furor in Australia as well. There were demonstrations campaigning for Van. Unfortunately, government, being the government, has continued with its murderous action. I had the honor also of providing editorial touches to a powerful account written by Vietnam's most prominent dissenting voice of freedom, the Venerable Thich Quang Do. His account of his experiences I put together in this book, collection called Those Who Dare. And it is a collection of Asia's leaders. Chapters have been contributed by Martin Lee from Hong Kong, Wang Dan of China, Tien Chua of Malaysia, and forward by Anwar Ibrahim, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia. Now, Vietnam is undoubtedly a closed society, even though it's the fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia. It is not unlike other oppressive, undemocratic regimes that opens up itself to free market and adopts liberal economic strategies, but at the same time severely restricts political and civil space. Asian governments have adopted this very, very dangerous practice. Human rights, liberty, and lives are ignored or worse, violated in the name of economic success and prosperity. Then again, this begs the question, economic success for whom? The only sure answer is for the already rich and powerful. The rest of us just get scraps off the table. Singapore and China are shining examples where economic gains for the already wealthy are attained at the expense and liberty of the ordinary folk. Unfortunately, Vietnam looks set heading that direction. As a Singapore democracy advocate who has been a victim of the government's repression, I cringe and I worry that when I hear reports of other countries looking at my tiny city-state as a role model for economic success. Vietnam is one such example. Your communist leader, Mr. Nong Duc Man, told the former Prime Minister of my country that Singapore is a good role model for your country's future development. There are many others who have echoed the same sentiment. Presidential candidate for Taiwan, Mr. Ma Ying-jeou, ousted Prime Minister Thak Sin, had emulated Singapore's blueprint, economic blueprint. Look at where he is today. But then what is wrong? What is wrong with role modeling after Singapore? After all, I mean, those of you who have been to Singapore, heard of Singapore, know Singapore to be this wealthy, this deep, this beautiful city. So what is wrong with role modeling after such an efficient country? Let me spend the next few minutes telling you exactly what is wrong with role modeling after Singapore. The truth is that Singapore's wealth and economic success is not sustainable. There is no public accountability by the government. Financial institutions are controlled by the state, in particular the family of Lee Kuan Yew. I don't know how many of you have heard of Lee Kuan Yew, but he was the former Prime Minister of Singapore, whose son is now the Prime Minister. And Lee Kuan Yew himself has elevated himself to and created a role for him called Minister Mentor. Now, no one's ever heard of a Minister Mentor in the world. Singapore is the first such. Now, transparency is non-existent when it comes to how the government invests our reserves. That's our money. The public has little access to real and accurate information about failed investment. Those who are responsible for the nation's future stockpile are answerable to no one except the Prime Minister and his father, Minister Mentor. The billions of dollars of the country's reserves lie in the hands of few who also have control over public institutions such as the media, judiciary, law enforcement agencies, and so on and so forth. The question of integrity and propriety necessarily arises. Singapore has been successful in ensuring that the citizenry remains afraid and compliant of powers that be. As Lee Kuan Yew had once said, and I quote him, "If nobody is afraid of I am meaning," unquote. And that is precisely how he has governed the country, through cultivating fear in the people. Total control by an oppressive government of fear in the people limits to a successful and sustainable economy. Basic rights such as freedom of expression and assembly are prohibited by the Singapore government. Draconian laws have landed quite a few of us into trouble. Many politicians have been bankrupted, imprisoned, or run out of the country. Let me give you a personal testimony. I have been arrested. I was arrested in October this last year for conducting a peaceful protest against what was happening in Burma, the murderous assault that the junta was taking on its people. I was arrested for that. I was made bankrupt by the state, particularly the Attorney General's office in August last year for raising a constitutional amendment to the Supreme Court of Singapore. I am being sued by Lee Kuan Yew and his Prime Minister's son, and also am currently under at least half a dozen police investigations. And all this arises from my exercising my basic constitutional rights of public speech, of public assembly and free expression. I've committed no crime. But because the leaders of my country are great to answer to the people and engage dissenting voices, they've ensured the opposition figures are silenced. When a government has total control over the legislative, executive and judicial branches, democracy cannot exist. Singaporeans are totally dependent on the government for all services, housing, transport, medical, water, gas, everything. People are afraid of risking their livelihoods should they speak out against the government. Genuine civil societies and NGOs are non-existent. Elections are under the total control of the people. Does this not sound exactly like Vietnam? So what kind of role model is Vietnam looking at or looking to? ministers that pay themselves millions of dollars, but at the same time consider welfare a dirty word? Do you know that the Prime Minister of Singapore is paid 6 times what George Bush is getting? He's paid more than 2.5 million US dollars a year. Even junior ministers are getting paid like 1.5 million US dollars a year. Is that the sort of wealth that Vietnam is thinking of creating for the leaders? All the people's money are managed by one family, and that's the Lee Kuan Yew family, his son and his son's wife. Is Vietnam going that way too? Singapore is widely known to be the money laundering center for ill-gotten gains by Indonesians, Burmese and the Thais because of its strict banking privacy policy. Is Vietnam looking to emulate Singapore? Now the Singapore government endears itself to many countries by making investments in ailing businesses and opening its doors widely to free trade. In return, many of these democratic nations hold their criticism when it comes to human rights abuses in Singapore, and many indeed turn a blind eye to the threat to democracy that Singapore poses. Is Vietnam going to learn this from Singapore too? So how do democracy advocates in repressive regimes such as Vietnam and Singapore push for reform? There is no exact formula. In Singapore, we continue to hold forums and workshops to create awareness, even though there are restrictions to the activities that we can hold. The internet is used extensively as a part. We make sure that information is put out on almost a daily basis. We use YouTube to get our message across, and in a little while, I will show you one of the short clips that we put out. In Singapore and Vietnam, where laws are made to restrict our right to speak, express ourselves and assemble, we need to challenge those laws peacefully. Peaceful civil disobedience is necessary in our circumstances. Our Malaysian friends have done this, and I don't know if you've read about it, the Bersih and the Hindra movements, whereby they had 40,000 people coming onto the street peacefully to ask for free, clean elections. For those, if there are any Malaysian friends in this room, I just want to say, I'm sure the Vietnamese and the Singaporeans are drawing inspiration from you. You continue to challenge injustice. You continue to advocate for justice, democracy. We stand ready to pay a price for peaceful and legitimate actions. As they say, freedom does not come free. Great struggles proceed. Many sacrifices will have to be made, but there is no doubt that one day, victory will be on our side. Thank you. Before I end, just let me show you the democracy.
This flame symbolizes the hope for a brighter and more democratic future for all of us here in Singapore. It carries whatever I believe in: justice, openness, and democracy. With this hope, I pass it on.
Thank you, Lawrence. I love my country and demand democratic rights for all Singaporeans. This candle carries my hopes and aspirations. I pass it on.
Thank you.
This flame will continue to burn because people like us, ordinary citizens of Singapore, are stepping forward to call out loudly for our political rights and for democracy. Tiny now, this flame will increase in its brightness for years to come. I pass it on.
I am a citizen of Singapore, and as a citizen, I have rights, and I will exercise those rights to build a democratic society. I ask you to join me in standing up for our fellow citizens and our nation. We can do that with this flame, the flame of democracy, the flame of hope. I pass it on.
Thanks. I'm a Singapore Democrat and proud to be one. This flame burns brightly in my heart and in my mind. I will always pass it on.